We are the Arcturian Collective. Hello and namaste.
Welcome.
Thank you. You have our unconditional love, and we thank you for your curiosity and willingness to co-create with us in this moment of your time. How may we be of service to you?
Thank you. We would like to explore the topic of open contact on an individual and collective level.
Great.
Yes. So we have a list of questions.
Awesome.
Curated by many people, actually. In what ways are we humans connected to extraterrestrials?
That's a very good question. We would say that... See if this works. So, a human being, if you identify as a human being, in a sense, you are a part within all that is. To say it very crude, you could say all that is a big bowl of soup, and you are a part of within that soup. So maybe you're a meatball, or maybe you're a piece of vegetable. But a lot of humans can be so identified that they see themselves in a way as external. So instead of understanding that, as Alan Watts says it, you are a wave that comes from the ocean, you see yourself as separate from all that is. But that is not, in a sense, that's a mind game. That's your mind creates concepts all the time that are very useful and is very, not unique, but very specific to the human experience, where you can make a concept of a part of all that is and kind of lift that out of all that is and then use it to have ideas about it and combine these ideas. And as a human, this is how you build cars and computers and how you can plan for the future, etc., etc. Now the dark side, in a sense, of this system is that you separate yourself from all that is, because you create this concept of you, a human being, but it's just a concept generated by that mind. In reality, you can never be separated. So just as you are a part within all that is, so are other beings a part within all that is. So, for example, to keep it on your planet, a seahorse within the sea is also a part of all that is. And a lot of you might be curious to learn about the seahorse. This is why you have zoos and aquaria and enjoy being out in nature, because in a way you like to connect to these other parts of all that is, even though you might not identify as them, because you have your own specific, you are your own specific part within all that is. You could call it a mandala. So just like a certain tree is a certain pattern of evolution and the physical parts and a blueprint, and all those ingredients make up a specific recipe, a specific process. In Buddhism you would call it a mandala, a specific unique form within the here and now. And in a way we would say that all that is, to know itself better, is in a natural way kind of curious, both towards its own mandala, its own form, but also how other forms in a sense arise within all that is. So if you understand that, or if you can understand your own curiosity towards animals, plants, other cultures within humanity, then we would say that just like that you are connected to ETs as well, because those patterns are, you have mandalas throughout the whole universe, not just within or on your planet. And in that way you are connected to other ETs, since you're all a mandala within all that is. And to understand itself better, it's fun and generally interesting to connect to these other appearances within all that is. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that really shed some nice light on in what ways we as humans are connected to not only ETs, but the seahorse and the sea and the horse and
exactly
everything.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Next question is, why are extraterrestrials interested in connecting with humans and other species on planet Earth?
Yeah, so this goes back quite a bit to what we just explained.
Yeah.
We would say it's mostly curiosity.
Mm.
We are a certain aspect within all that is, and by seeing what we in a sense project to be outside of ourselves, by getting to know those parts, we actually learn about ourselves.
Mm.
So maybe you have experienced this when you were traveling yourself. As long as you are within your own culture, within your own country, within your own language, there's a lot of things you take for granted and see as normal.
Yeah.
But then the moment you travel outside, you suddenly see that people in a different region have different customs, different cultures, different languages. And by learning about them, you actually learn a lot about yourself as well.
Mm.
And this is, again, probably also why you're interested to visit elephants and trees and monkeys, because by observing and connecting to other animals, you learn about yourself as well. And this same mechanism applies to ETs as well. Now, we wouldn't want to go as far to say that you're like a zoo to us, because that might introduce some elements of hierarchy that aren't there. But if you see a child just enjoying to connect to the birds and to other beings from that loving open place, we would say just like that energy, there's a natural interest in a lot of ET species to connect to you as humanity, but not just to the humans. We're also very interested to connect to the dolphins and the whales, and in a sense to all beings that we can find on your planet.
Fantastic, wow. Does that include all ET interest, or are there some very specific extraterrestrial agendas that are playing out?
Yes, in a sense there can be infinite amount of games that can be played within this system. So just like you might really study the elephant and really enjoy connecting to that, some other humans like to think that certain parts of the animals can enrich them and can be of personal benefit for them. And then they might behave in a certain way towards certain animals that might be less harmonious to those animals. And so you could say that there are some ET species that are more identified within this idea of being separate as well, not in a sense understanding their connection, that they are a process within all that is, and maybe not understanding the beauty and, from our perspective, the equality of all those processes within all that is. So some of those ET species might have a more personalized agenda than others.
Interesting. It makes me think of how we as humans are looking from a very separated, selfish way upon animals at times.
Yes.
And even such a, seemingly harmless action as collecting wool from a sheep. How do you see that? Like, if I am to enter my connectedness and know that I am equally the sheep, the wool, and myself, would I still allow myself to share the sheep?
In a sense, that's really a question that every individual needs to answer for themselves. So we would say that on the level of all that is, it's really all neutral, right? Because it's the some patterns lead to other patterns, right? So it's all just one big process. And to say that one pattern should remain in a sense, and another pattern shouldn't exist, in a sense that only happens if we put our judgment on it, right? So if we say this pattern is better than the other, or we prefer this pattern more, so we try to hold on to that pattern, and we don't like that pattern as much, so we try to remove from that pattern. And in a sense, that's also the journey of being incarnated in physicality and polarity as a viewpoint, as an identification within the game. You do have preferences, and you do, in a sense, have to survive. Now, it is our experience that the better an individual or a species learns to survive, and then the more they understand their connectedness to all it is, you will generally see a natural move towards more harmony within its system. So you could still shear the sheep, for example, since it's not that damaging to the sheep, and if you're grateful for it and take care of the animal, or maybe leave it a bit more free, but you can see if you can find a win-win solution where both the sheep and the human being benefit most, and you could even see how you want to include the broader environment in that as well. And if you do it like that, it becomes, from our perspective, a very fun game, the game of finding as much harmony as you can within all the evolved elements.
Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome.
That was a slight detour from the main topic.
Yes.
What is human and ET contact from your perspective?
Well, we would say that once a human learns to understand itself to a certain degree, the idea to want to connect to more of itself, or you could say it wants to understand all that is on a bigger level, we would say that almost automatically sparks a curiosity within that being to connect and also become interested in the broader ET contacts. And once that spark is, in a sense, ignited, then there's a lot of ETs that kind of pick up on that spark. And then if they feel excited to connect to that individual as well, which is highly exciting to a lot of ETs, then the beginning of a connection can be formed. It's a bit like, we've said it once before, and you could say, like, imagine that because all of your species, within all species, go through a kind of natural evolution. So they generally lead to an evolution of being adjusted to a specific system. And if it's needed or possible, generally the complexity tends to go up a little bit. So the species can handle more information, it can have a bigger influence on its environment, or it can expand levels of joy, of understanding. If it cannot express it in an outward motion, it could express it in an inward motion. It becomes more spiritual in a sense. But so sometimes it's been said that imagine that tomorrow a lot of your monkeys on your planet would start to speak. Wouldn't that be interesting to a lot of humans? Exactly. It's extremely interesting. And just that energy, we would say, is also translatable for humans opening up to this, in a sense, broader part of themselves. Because they've opened up to this idea, like, I'm part within all that is. Now, how big is all that is, and can I, in a sense, through the insight, by understanding myself better, by understanding this connection of me with all that is better, can I then connect to other parts of myself or other parts within all that is. And this is when humans on an individual level open up to the possibility of ET contact.
Interesting. Huh. That's a great answer. And very specific, and you're very fast at answering. I love it.
Thank you.
Is ET contact relevant for every human being on the planet?
We would say on one level yes, but it might not necessarily express itself through the ego consciousness that they live their physical reality through. So this is very much to do with maybe you would call it the consciousness development within each individual human being. So we would say if there's this natural curiosity that comes to bloom within this life, then it's very relevant. And it's also a conscious relevance. But we would say that also for a lot of humans, they're still going through their lessons. And for them, on a conscious level, it's not so relevant. But this, we would say that especially, we would say humans being born after the 2000s, we would say that for them, we would say for 99%, it's relevant to a pretty large degree.
Why is it relevant?
Because your collective is moving into a time and age where you're developed enough to start to open up to this next level of connecting to comparable consciousnesses, or how do you say it? To from the computer game perspective, you have done so much on your current level that for your own growth as a collective and as all individuals within the collective, it becomes kind of relevant to connect to external consciousness outside of your planet.
Interesting. Why don't the ETs just land with a big ship on a very public place on planet Earth?
What do you think would happen if we tried this?
Celebration!
How far would we make it before your fighter jets come greet us with missiles?
Yeah, but don't you have like protective systems? Like if you were like just landing and saying, "Hey, we're here and we're gonna stay in the ship until you chill out," and present some rational representative who is willing to actually build a bridge of communication. Wouldn't that happen, maybe?
Yes, well, it's a nice idea, but in a sense what you're saying about the rational communication lines, that is actually happening already. And in that sense, we're not saying it can't happen, and we're definitely seeing that the collective energy is getting more ready for it. But also do understand that if one of the ET races would do that, first of all, and we're not joking, there is a certain personal risk to do that, because if we come into your frequency of reality, we also have to adhere to your laws within that frequency of reality. And in that sense, spaceships can be shut down, or we need to take very specific countermeasures to that. But then it's already a bit, if you want to visit your neighbors, but you need to take countermeasures to make sure you're going to be safely invited into their house. Can you see that is already, in a sense, a breach of a certain harmony level?
Yeah, I can see that.
So, and then apart from that, also a lot of humans might be ready now, but there's also humans that are still very... in a sense, their patterns are very much guided through specific belief systems. And if we would suddenly show up, that would require them to really adjust some of those belief systems.
Yeah.
And for some of those people, that might be so shocking that it could really, in a way, upset them mentally.
Right.
And we don't want to, in a sense, cause that harm. So there's always, in a sense, a reading of the collective energies. And once those collective energies are, in a sense, ready, where we feel we would be welcomed in a safe and harmonious way, and that also our open presence wouldn't upset some of your population to the degree that it would basically really mentally possibly damage them, then we would say the time is right, but at the moment that is not yet the case.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, I'll just continue with the questions. I have a lot of questions on my own, but I think this is a good format. So, can you or your ships travel faster than the speed of light? And if so, how do you do that?
Yes, that's a very technical question.
Yes.
In a sense, we could say yes, that we can travel faster than light, and the answer is through consciousness. So, if you can think of something, again, let's go back to the original thing. If you understand that you are a wave within the ocean, or you are a part within all that is, then in a sense that identity of a separated you is just that. It's an identity. And to a large degree that's created by the mind. And if you can let go of that identity, you can actually experience to a very real degree your oneness with all that is. So in a sense you're both your identified part here, but you're also an intrinsic part of all that is. Always. You cannot be outside all that is. And once you understand that, once you in a sense can connect to all that is, then, especially if you have a specific way to tune in, you can actually tune into other parts within all that is. And that is, in a sense, a lot faster than light speed.
Yeah. So is that our physical bodies?
Yes.
They are, in a sense, also, from what I understand, they are also, under the... What you just said applies to our bodies too. Would that be true? That we kind of almost like quantum teleportation, since we're all one and the entirety of all that is within us and we can tune to it. Is it realistic to imagine that, as a body, I can tune into another location and from that moment instantaneously be in the location I'm tuned to? Is that realistic?
Yes, it's realistic, but also it's very important to understand exactly what you see here as what you are. So also understand that your physical body is, in a sense, a highly
temporary?
It's highly temporary, but it's also hyper specialized to be in a very specific region within your physical system and your planet.
Yeah.
So you could say it's like if you take a goldfish, like within your technology, you can take a goldfish and in a sense put it in the desert, right?
Yeah.
So we would say there might be the option of doing that, but it is very important to see what the result of that would be. And
so
that is also one reason why for a lot of ET beings and also other guides, it's actually a lot easier for us to meet on the consciousness level, and where the physical level, in a sense, is more challenging.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, and it makes me wonder because there are obviously us who are incarnated in these more dense bodies,
Yes.
consciousness being more on a slower wave of time and beingness. There are benefits and there are things that I love about the physical body, but still I would love to attune to higher freedoms, and
Yes.
I would be willing to shed this body if there is a way to move from this body into a next body that is virtually the same but of a less density in a way, where I can still experience senses, still experience physical touch, but perhaps have the ease and flow of materializing and rematerializing. You see where I'm going with this?
Yes, yes, and in a way there are options already now, but it's more like what sometimes people have referred to as your astral body.
Yeah.
So within that, it's actually a lot easier to travel.
It is.
And connect to other entities, planets. And so in a sense you already have that option within you, but then you need to kind of learn to connect to that astral body more, and like places like the Monroe Institute that have specialized in astral projection, there's definitely options to do that, but we would say for your physical body, since it's so hyper attuned and there's so much knowledge and intelligence and adjustment to the physical life, we would say that 99.9% of the cases it would be unbeneficial for your physical body to go on those journeys.
Okay, interesting. So if my girlfriend lives in France, I should rather actually move my physical mass to her. Is that what you're saying? If I'm not going to participate in astral travel, if I want to?
Yes, within that it would definitely be safe, but even then you would already need to accustom yourself a little bit, and even your physical and mental body, because you would need to learn the language, for example. So even within that little shift on your planet, you would already need to make a quite drastic mental approach.
That's so true.
So you can only imagine how that would be and what it would cost on a physical, mental, emotional level to go outside of your planet. Now, obviously, there are some planets that are extremely similar to your planet, so there are definitely planets that would support your physicality. But we would say if you're looking for the law of least resistance, it's actually a lot easier to connect to other consciousnesses through channeling, through astral projection, etc. And once you, in a sense also, the more you know about this, the more you develop, then in a sense once this mandala of your physical body kind of naturally drops, then then you can in a sense choose where you want to, if you want to incarnate again, and where you want to do that. So it is actually an option to then incarnate on another planet or on and then you can in a sense incarnate within a physical body that is adjusted to that specific environment.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, next question.
Yes.
How would ETs like to be received by humans on planet Earth? If we are to receive you, have you a welcome party almost?
Yes.
How would you like to be received?
Well, generally in a sense of compassion, empathy, and brothership and sisterhood. So we would love to meet on that level where both you and we understand that we're reflections of each other, and that although we are very different in maybe the physicality, we are also very similar, since we're all beings within all that is. And once that understanding is established, but understand that the understanding of that principle alone is also being reflected in how you treat your fellow human beings and how you treat the other beings on your planet. So once that understanding is understood enough and also shown in your actions towards each other and towards your fellow human beings, then we would love to connect with you, and that's really an energy where we would love to be received by you and where you would also be welcomed to other planets.
Amazing. It reminds me of first of all, the healing we do in ourselves seems to have a collective influence as well.
Absolutely.
And one of my personal points, I'm thinking like meeting an alien could feel like meeting a bear out in the woods.
Yes.
And our instinct is usually, there's survival mechanisms that have not yet been tamed by our conscious presence.
No.
And I wonder, in the actual realistic scenario, if I were to walk out in the Canadian forests and suddenly I see a grizzly bear,
yes,
and there is this moment where you kind of identify each other, how can I feel safe? I mean, would that affect the bear because the bear, is a different type of manifestation of consciousness?
Yes.
And if I meet a bear, my desire is to be a really good friend of it. I'd like to, be my brother the bear, and I'm the brother of the bear,
Yes.
Is that something I can ensure just by the way I choose to interact with it?
Do you mean with the bear or with
the
ET? Well, it really depends, since the bear also has its own mandala.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of follows those patterns as well. So if the bear is very hungry, you might become the bear in a sense. So there is some. It's important to recognize that and to assess your risk levels according to that.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to ETs, we would say if you feel that there's this inner curiosity and this kind of heart's desire to connect to your ET counterparts, then that is definitely being noticed. And then depending on your level of integration, so your consciousness, but also your subconsciousness and your unconsciousness, like what kind of species spheres have been built in to form your physicality here. There can be a lot of emotions that can come up in this encounter, but if you've processed a lot of that already, and if you have tools to integrate those feelings whenever they come up and might occur, like the more integrated you are, so the more you understand you are a fractal within all it is, and the more familiar you are with all that is and all its other forms, then that would definitely increase the chances of being able to physically meet an ET, because then the shock would not be, in a sense, disturbing to you as an individual. And understand that an ET, it depends a little bit, but generally, because within physicality you never know exactly how things will play out. But there's definitely kind of timelines and percentages where you can assess, like, this will probably have a success rate of 95%. So, but an ET doesn't want to, in a sense, upset a physical human being either. And what can happen also, if you meet an ET being with a very integrated frequency, that frequency can then trigger unintegrated parts within you, and that might bring up a lot of fear or anger or sadness. And if humans don't understand this and how this works within them, then sometimes they can project it on the outside, so they might project it on the ET being. And that is very logical, but that is not where it doesn't make it the right response, in a sense. And so such a situation might be upsetting to both the individual, and it might, in a sense, create a little bit of danger for the ET being as well.
Interesting.
And in that sense, an ET being won't initiate physical contact with another human being if the risk of either triggering too much within the human is too great.
Yeah.
So, but we would say there has been contact with human beings, we would say almost throughout history, but it really has to do with the level of integration of the human being. So the more enlightened, in a sense, the more integrated, the easier it will be to make that physical contact with ET beings.
That makes sense.
With a certain level of ET beings, obviously, there can be certain contracts that make it that an ET being suddenly walks into your life, and all the drama that might pursue from that will play out in a certain way. But from our perspective, then it's often there's a very specific script for that. But if you're not part of that script and you're curious about ET beings, we would say the more, in a sense, self-development you do and the more integration you do, the more you understand that you're a pattern within all that is, the higher the chances you can connect to ET beings, because it becomes more relevant for you, and it can also happen in a harmonious way.
Yeah. Okay. Next question then.
Yes.
Does ET contact grow from individual and then to small groups and then to bigger groups to planetary contact? Is it like a progression like this?
Yes, you could say that that's kind of a natural progression. Obviously, it's very important that even within this progression is that it's always the initiation for ET contact should always come from within.
Yeah.
So if an individual has had that and they have gone through the process and they've learned to connect, and then there's other individuals that also want to learn this, then this first individual can help those other individuals on their journey. But he or she can only be a guide. The people need to do the work themselves. And then once you have a little group, again, maybe this group can express their joy, their alignment that they've experienced through these contacts in a certain way within your culture. This can be through music or art or written books or videos. And then that might attract more people that feel ready for that. But understand that already, that expression might already trigger certain fear beliefs within the broader collective as well. And so that group might attract those responses as well. Now, if a small group is able to kind of help the people with a natural interest and curiosity that are ready, and in addition are ready also to deal with all the fear responses it might trigger in the general population, then it can definitely expand contact. But sometimes the fear response within the bigger collective might be overwhelming for the little group as well. So it's a bit of testing the waters. There.
Considering the fear response actually makes me think of one of these. There is this wound that seems to have occurred with humans, and it is in regards to, just like the bear could eat the man and the man in a sense would become the bear, there is a fear that certain extraterrestrials that have been viewed as demons in the past and even to this day.
Yes.
That they could, just like the bear, eat them. They could kind of take their soul. I've seen people speculate on this and actually showing fear that, oh my God, when there is abductions and such, they attempt to harvest my soul. That's some people who have said that.
Yes.
What can we? How can we ease that? And what is the truth to that also?
Well, it also depends a bit what these people mean with the soul, because
it's like a more spiritual body, I think.
Yes. But understand that that will always be part of all that is, right? So in that sense, if you say there, like for example, does a chicken have a soul? And if you eat a chicken, do you take over their soul? Like how do the mechanics work here?
Interesting.
Because we feel there's a lot of confusion that people haven't properly defined these things, and then they say, oh, I am something, but that can be destroyed. My essence can be destroyed. Somehow I can become outside of all that is in some way, or somehow the essence of me can be permanently shattered. And that, from our perspective, comes from a very identified perspective. So in a sense, a very ego-based perspective. And we don't mean ego here in a negative way, but you're almost already identifying yourself as outside of all that is. And then apparently you have this little lifeline that connects you to everything else, but somehow that lifeline can be lost, and then you're lost forever. We're not sure exactly, but there's a belief system there that's from our perspective very contradictory and not that logical. Now, to go a bit more back to the question, obviously there can be certain ET species that have more of their own agendas. And you could say this, for example, the whole grey agenda of hybridizing with certain humans. And even though the result can be quite beautiful and constructive, just like going to a dentist or a doctor, you do the result is quite useful in the long run, but the procedure itself can be quite unpleasant and sometimes to a degree even somewhat traumatizing. So there's definitely agendas that can be played off like that within your collective, within all that is. But what you can do about that, again, is basically the only constructive thing you can do about that is actually to develop yourself to the best of your ability as a human being. So to process the trauma, to go into your mental emotional system and understand yourself better, know yourself better, what you are. And once you understand that no matter what happens to you, you're always gonna be within all that is, then a lot of the fear might already dissipate. And you might feel a lot more connection. And we think that's the answer we can give so far. If there's any additional questions to this, we will be happy to answer that.
What determines if a person experiences or what determines if a person harmonizes with the experience of being abducted or meeting some benevolent energetic being? What is it that makes one experience one thing and another the other?
Well, to a degree it's randomness, to be very honest. Just like when you travel to a new place, some people find a very difficult desert where it's very difficult to survive in and very unpleasant, and another might find a beautiful jungle filled with fruit trees and bodies of water. So to a degree there is an element of randomness to it, but how you respond to the experience, that can for a large degree be determined in a sense by your level of consciousness and by this idea of how you understand yourself.
Because so how we meet it is up to us.
Yes, that is to a large degree up to yourself. And then again, as we said before, the more harmony you can find within yourself already, the more of these kind of darker parts, both on an individual level and sometimes also of parallel lives, you can confront and integrate. In a sense, then you open up to... The thing is, what you want to do is to understand that you can meet it all and that you're okay with that.
Yeah.
If you can give that a place, and you can definitely say this is not my preference after you've experienced it, and look for something else. But if you're okay with the experience to begin with, then in a sense it's less important, and then automatically. But this is very much, again, the way to enlightenment, right? So if you can allow the sad feelings and the angry feelings within yourself without necessarily identifying too much with them, but simply feeling who or what is experiencing this, and then take a bit of distance from those feelings, and then allow those feelings to be there anyway from a loving and compassionate place. So if you're able to do that, and then you can also enjoy the beautiful feelings of connection and joy you can have with another human being, but also in a sense not attaching too much to that, but still bring that love and happiness to that you might feel from that. The more you can do that, in a sense, the broader of the experiences you can have with other ETs as well.
Yeah.
And even if you would meet a species that might have a more self-centered agenda, that doesn't mean that it can be super interesting and that you can learn a lot from those experiences too. Right? Just like
exactly, yeah.
Just like you, it might be very exciting to meet a bear in the wild, even knowing the danger, but it might be smart to prepare in a way that the potential damage from that encounter is minimized.
Yeah.
But if you can do that, and you could study the bear and you feel safe, you can have a wonderful encounter with that being as well. And you can learn so much from it, because it is also part of all that is. It is also a reflection of you. Yes?
Exactly, yeah. You mentioned randomness.
Yes.
What determines the randomness we experience? What determines randomness?
Well, what we mean with randomness is that sometimes people get used to a certain environment. Yes?
Yeah.
And they experience that environment, and they experience it a lot. So in a sense it becomes very fine-tuned. So this is something I prefer, this is something I don't prefer, etc., etc. Now, if you travel outside of that, you're going to encounter new things. You're going to explore a new part of the map. You're going to have new experiences. Now, some of those experiences might be afterwards be judged as less preferable and others as more preferable.
Right.
And we're using the word randomness because you could kind of follow your excitement, right? So if you follow your own curiosity, your own excitement, you could definitely steer it towards the area where you're more likely to have positive experiences, or experiences that afterwards you would judge to be positive.
Yeah.
And maybe we actually need to go a bit deeper into this. Like from the experience of all that is on its highest level, if you don't put a judgment on a certain experience, then it keeps neutral, right?
Yeah.
So an experience isn't a good or a bad experience.
Right.
It's just an experience,
Mm-hmm.
and every experience within all it is in a sense unique and a beautiful co-creation.
Yeah.
However, if you are within your identified part within all that is, then obviously you have certain parameters that needs to be fulfilled to maintain the pattern you're at the moment.
Right.
And if you're attached to that pattern, which makes a lot of sense because you would like that pattern to continue at least for a little while, then obviously you get very specific preferences and of what you do and don't want to happen or imagine to happen. So, but it's also a bit, you also again don't always know yourself that well. So you might travel to Germany and then next year you might travel to France.
Yeah.
And you might find out that for you the French people are very fun and you really vibe with that. While the German people, you don't know exactly why, but you don't feel the vibe, and maybe they eat stuff you really don't enjoy, so there's less of a preference there. But for your friend, it might be exactly the opposite. So in that sense, that's a bit what we mean by randomness, because how you experience a certain thing, you do that through your own filter, and you don't always know yourself yet well enough to find out what you prefer and don't prefer. This is where you have the experience first, and then you can label the experience and the contrast, what you preferred and didn't prefer. And you simply can't always know that beforehand.
Right.
So that's a bit what we mean by the randomness. So for one person traveling to France, it might be a beautiful experience, while for another person traveling to France, they might judge that experience very differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So to move consciously from our, random pattern,
yes.
If an individual decides to improve the chances of ET contact,
yes,
how should he go about it? How should he or she do that to improve those chances of that ET contact?
Yes, well, once again, work on yourself, understand yourself better, and also, in a sense, follow that thread of excitement. If you feel a certain curiosity towards a place, towards a group of people, towards a body of knowledge, then move into that direction. Take action on those excitements so you can integrate it within yourself, and in that way change your own frequency. You integrate those experiences within your own frequency, so you change your own frequency, and your new changed frequency will then might have an impact on what you will attract as well. Now, the more integrated you become as a human being, the easier it will become for these more harmonious ET beings to connect with you.
Okay, thank you. What can small groups do to improve their chances of ET contact?
We would say it's a bit the same, much the same, but then the interesting thing of small groups is that while you can start to co-create, both energetically through certain meditations, but also through, basically in infinite ways. So you could make nice music, for example, that stimulates certain connections, or you can set up events together, or through certain meditations set up a group field energy. So we would say it's very much the same. The more integrated the individuals are within the group, the stronger the group becomes. So the group can actually help if the group can hold, in a sense, set the structure so the individuals within that structure can develop themselves quicker, easier because of the experience of others or because of sharing the ways that seem to work better and more efficiently than other ways, then the group can help all the individuals within. But then also, because you have more individuals, you can get a lot of creative, fun, co-creative options going, which can help all individuals within that group as well.
Great. Yeah, so if we were to have a CE5 meeting soon, which of those tips, or if any other, would you say is the most apropos to implement?
Well, we would say there's already some things that are being done within the CE5 that are working very well. So the group meditations are very good. The power of 8 is very useful as well.
Yeah.
What might be very useful as well, but this must be a bit tested within the group, is to also kind of support each other in those maybe more subconscious and unconscious trauma aspects. Now, we're not necessarily saying that it might be good to create a space where people can be open about that to a larger degree, but this obviously requires vulnerability from the individuals as well, so they can share, and then also the willingness to kind of do the work to integrate that themselves.
Yeah.
But if you can create a safe environment where people feel comfortable opening up, and where people are not, while they're opening up, to really receive tips how to help them through these things, and not just for sympathy, for example, then, and if the group can help these individuals give the right information, processes, maybe support, then that can really help as well. So we would both say integrate the subconscious and unconscious parts on the one level, and on the other level have fun co-creating kind of high frequency states through expressing creativity, co-creativeness, sharing, very clearly stating how and what you would like to get from ET contact, so that becomes clear to the individual, but also to the group, and potentially to the ET counterparts that might be listening in when these things are being discussed. So yes,
that's
that useful. Yes,
very useful, especially the healthy area to share, vulnerability and to heal traumas.
Yes,
and be willing to trust our fellow CE5ers.
Yes.
So what can an individual or a small group do to help prepare the collective for global ET contact?
Well, we would say that's a bit too ambitious. What you can do is to develop yourself and see if you can help develop your friend or neighbor. And then it could be potentially that some of the stuff you create or co-create with a group can go viral in a sense, and then be of positive influence to a lot of other beings. But that is, in a way, you shouldn't, the moment that becomes a goal of the co-creation, you in a sense bring the wrong energy to it.
Interesting.
So we would simply say, learn to understand yourself, again, integrate your subconscious and unconscious parts, either on an individual level or, if you can, with the help of the group. Follow your own excitement, create from that excitement, again, either from an individual or co-create stuff with the group or with individuals from the group, and then simply let those processes do its work. And the more integrated your frequency becomes, the more integrated the frequency of the small group becomes, that will have an effect on the broader collective. But there are so many powers and energies in play on the global level that it is extremely difficult to predict exactly what could happen.
Exactly. Huh. Okay, are there any ET races that are more connected to Scandinavia and Norway than others? And we're asking this both at this time and historically. And if so, which ones?
Well, you have the so-called Nordics, and they're called that for a reason. But yeah, we'll mostly keep it with that. Again, sometimes there are these more specific agendas, but we kind of feel that for the general topic of this, we prefer to keep it with a general contact.
Okay.
And yes, so we'll leave it at that. If people want to know more, they can look up the Nordics online and see what theories are out there about that.
Cool.
Because what we why we're answering this in this way is because, in a sense, it sounds a bit exclusionary, right?
Yeah.
Like you already get a bit of this energies of, oh, these are a special group of people. And that by definition is actually fracturing you from the collective energy. And in a sense, it's that focus, in a sense, is not the focus, in a sense, needed if you're interested for this more harmonious individual and collective ET contact.
Okay. Good. Are there any so-called world leaders that are in fact aliens?
Well, we would say not necessarily world leaders, but there are definitely individuals that have connections with their ET counterparts. But we would say if most of these beings are born on Earth and born in physical, human, sometimes somewhat hybridized bodies. But we could say that they're at least 80% humans.
Yeah.
And then also don't forget that, again, if we go back to the all that is, because we kind of feel the question is a bit loaded.
Yeah.
Like it's a bit like, oh, even if they were ETs, what kind of hellish consequences would that have? And we would say that that's not necessarily the energy you need to bring to it. We would say if you're looking for the more, obviously there are reflections in this though. Like we would say that if you have a very true and honest spiritual leader that is interested in truth and love and helping their fellow human beings, if they've really developed that and been effective in practicing that, really integrating again those subconscious and unconscious parts, really showing in their actions that they care about their fellow human beings, if a certain level in that is reached, it makes a lot of sense that they would connect to certain ET connections as well, because they become so integrated that they understand that they're more than just their physical body. Especially if you look at kind of Hindu and Buddhist cultures, they understand that you might have incarnated multiple times. Now, why could not one of those incarnations be on an ET planet, right? And if they open up those connections, they could kind of connect to the love and knowledge of those beings and those experiences and see if they can make that relevant for human beings here on the planet. Then again, they are still fully human, but because they've opened up, you could say their consciousness is no longer fully human, even though the biology might be. Now, obviously, this works also for people that are extremely interested in power and dominating their fellow human beings. It's a bit the law of attraction. If you push that through to a certain agenda, you can definitely also connect to, you could say, extraterrestrial or multidimensional energies that kind of reflect that mindset. But often these kind of energies are somewhat parasitic, because if you really feel you need to exploit your fellow human beings, it kind of makes sense karmically that you then connect to a consciousness that tells you to help you in that quest, but they in a sense are by definition somewhat parasitic as well. So there's definitely that option too, and it depends a bit on the political systems you have and the political leaders you have. But there's definitely options that those connections are made. But from our perspective, those connections are often by people that are kind of behind the visible powers.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Yes.
A couple of last questions. The difference between to contact from our part,
yes,
and being contacted by benevolent, extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial beings.
Yes.
Would you talk about that?
Yes. So again, to be contacted by, so there's a couple of things a benevolent being by definition would do, right? So in a way it would not invade in your life until you want contact, right?
Yeah.
So as long as, what we said before, this natural curiosity in a sense starts to bloom within the being, such a being generally won't kind of make itself known. They might be there, they might be helping you like your guides, but you simply won't be aware of it. Now once you notice this curiosity, then you can act on it and also simply speak that out loud, like, oh, I would be interested to connect to my guides or to connect to benevolent ET parallel lives if I have them. And simply by stating that, that can in a sense be an invitation, and they can start showing up in dreams, etc. Now an ET being that simply walks into your life and that might kind of shock certain parts of it, that's definitely an option too, but that is usually agreed upon by certain soul contracts or certain karmic contracts. And in that way, if you're not already experiencing that, it's very difficult to get such a contract within this lifetime. So we would say, in a way, if it's actually, unless you already had it in a contract in this incarnation, it's actually a lot easier to connect to the more benevolent species by going this path of integration, etc., than it is to connect to these other beings.
Interesting. Last question.
Yes.
Do you have any last viewpoints you would like to share with us?
Well, we would definitely like to thank you for your interest in this subject, and we really hope that this interaction with you can be used by you to expand yourselves, to go into those sometimes somewhat uncomfortable parts that you prefer to maybe push away, but do understand that going into that and integrating them really will pay off when it comes to wanting to connect to these broader parts of, in a sense, yourself, these other parts within all that is, that you are always intrinsically a part of. And we are looking forward a lot to establish contact, both on individual level and on group levels, and hopefully within the next decades also on a more collective level.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your space-time interaction. We appreciate you and looking forward to our next interaction.
Great. Thank you very much as well. Again, you have our unconditional love, and we thank you for your curiosity and willingness to have interacted with us. Goodbye and namaste.
Namaste.